She was a raccoon born for the wild, meant to climb trees under moonlight, to forage in leafy forests, to live with the wind in her fur and the stars as her guide. But fate had other plans. He was a family dog, safe and steady, with soft eyes and a heart so gentle it seemed to hold the whole world. No one could have predicted that their paths would cross, or that they would become soulmates from the very first day they met. Crystal's story began in the hush of an early morning, the kind of quiet that only comes before the world wakes up. She was just a newborn raccoon, no bigger than the palm of a hand, trembling and alone near the edge of a backyard swimming pool. Cold, fragile, barely breathing. She should have been nestled in a den, wrapped in the warmth of her mother's fur. Instead, she was abandoned, vulnerable, fighting for every heartbeat. The family who found her didn't hesitate. They ran a small wildlife rescue on their property. People who believed every life, no matter how small, deserved a chance. They carried her inside, wrapped her in soft, fleece-lined blankets, and began bottle feeding her every 2 hours, day and night. Her tiny body was so fragile, they could feel her ribs with their fingertips. Her breaths came in shallow gasps. But they held on, and so did she. Day after day, they watched her grow. First, her eyes opened, dark, curious, full of quiet wonder. Then her little paws began to move. She'd curl her tiny fingers around a human finger, cling to warmth like it was life itself. "She's doing wonderful," someone would whisper during a 3 a.m. feeding. "Look how much bigger she is already." Her fur thickened. Her tail began to show the faintest black rings, the signature of a raccoon destined for the wild. Hope grew with every gram she gained. But then, something changed. As the weeks passed, it became clear that Crystal's back legs weren't developing like they should. She tried to stand, to wobble on unsteady limbs, but her hindquarters wouldn't respond the way nature intended. At first, they thought it was temporary, a delay, a weakness from her rough start. But tests confirmed the truth. Crystal had developed a rare autoimmune condition that attacked her nervous system, leaving her with permanent mobility issues. By the time she was just a few months old, walking like a normal raccoon was impossible. Climbing trees? Out of the question. Foraging on her own? Too dangerous. The dream of releasing her into the forest, the very reason they had cared for her so fiercely, slowly slipped away. For many, that would have been the end of the story. A rescued wild animal deemed unreleasable often faces an uncertain future. But this family didn't see a problem. They saw her. They made a decision that changed everything. Crystal would stay, not as a project, not as a patient, but as family. What could have been a heartbreaking limitation became a new kind of freedom. She would never scamper through autumn leaves or splash in forest streams, but she would know love, safety, belonging. And in her own way, she would still explore the world. It was during this tender transition, when Crystal was learning to navigate life on her own terms, that she met Tumba. Tumba was the family's large, gentle dog, a calm presence with soulful eyes and a tail that wagged like a slow metronome of joy. He wasn't excitable or loud. He was steady. The kind of dog who leaned against your leg when you were sad, who sighed contentedly when the sun hit just right on the porch. At first, Tumba was curious about the tiny raccoon who moved differently, who made soft chirping sounds, who sometimes backed away when he got too close. Crystal, for her part, was cautious. One moment she'd tilt her head, studying him with intelligent eyes. The next, she'd retreat, unsure if this big creature meant her harm. But Tumba never pushed. He didn't bark. He didn't crowd her. He simply waited. He'd lie nearby while she ate, ears perked but body relaxed. He'd watch her from a distance as she practiced dragging herself across the rug with her strong front paws. And sometimes he'd nudge a toy toward her, not to play, but to say, "I see you. I'm here." Slowly, Crystal began to trust him. It started with a single shared moment. She was resting on a sun-warmed blanket when Tumba settled beside her, not touching, just close enough that their fur almost brushed. Crystal turned her head, sniffed the air. Then, with the tiniest shift, she leaned into his side. Tumba didn't move. He just exhaled a deep, happy sigh, as if he'd been waiting for this exact second his whole life. From that moment on, they were inseparable. Mornings began with their shared breakfast. Crystal, clever and mischievous, quickly learned to snatch the tastiest morsels from Tumba's bowl before he could finish. He never growled, never snapped. He just watched her with amused eyes, tail thumping softly, as if to say, "Go ahead, you earned it." Afternoons were for naps. They'd curl up together on the couch, nose to nose. Crystal's tiny body rising and falling with the rhythm of Tumba's steady heartbeat. She'd fall asleep, listening to the deep, soothing sound of his breath, safe in the knowledge that he wouldn't leave. Evenings were for slow walks around the yard. At first, Crystal struggled to keep up, but then a miracle arrived in the form of a gift from a kind supporter. A custom stroller, built just for her. It had soft padding, a sunshade, and low sides so she could sit upright and take it all in. The stroller became her chariot, her freedom, her way of claiming the world that had once felt too big, too overwhelming. On walks, Tumba would pace beside her, never pulling ahead, always matching her pace. Crystal's ears, those beautiful, tufted radars, would swivel toward every sound. Birds in the trees, leaves rustling, the distant bark of another dog. Her eyes would light up, and she'd chatter softly, as if narrating the journey only Tumba could understand. And he did, because Crystal had her own language. She didn't need words. She spoke with her fluffy, ringed tail, flicking it when she was excited, wrapping it around her body when she was content. She nudged with her head to ask for affection. She'd tap Tumba's paw with her own when she wanted him closer. And Tumba? He listened. He became her guardian in every sense of the word. If she seemed tired, he'd rest his head on her stroller. If she was startled by a loud noise, he'd press his body against hers until she relaxed. He never left her side, not even when guests came or storms rolled in. In return, Crystal gave him something just as rare: purpose. Tumba had always been a good dog, but with Crystal, he became something more: a protector, a friend, a silent companion who understood that love isn't about fixing someone. It's about walking beside them, exactly as they are. Their bond defied logic. A raccoon and a dog, natural adversaries in the wild, had chosen each other in a world that offered no rules for their friendship. They didn't care about species or instinct. They cared about trust, comfort, the quiet joy of simply being together. Crystal may never leap through branches or dig for grubs in the earth, but she found her forest anyway. It was in the backyard, where Tumba patiently waited while she sniffed every blade of grass. It was in the living room, where they shared sunbeams and dreams. It was in the way Tumba's tail wagged the moment she entered a room. And Crystal? She thrived. She played with plush toys, though she preferred stealing Tumbas. She loved watching birds from the window. She'd help with laundry by dragging socks into her stroller. And every night, without fail, she'd curl beside Tumba on her favorite cushion, safe in the knowledge that she was home. Her story was no longer about loss. It was about reinvention, about finding joy in a life that looked different than expected, but no less beautiful. Because Crystal didn't just survive, she bloomed. And at the center of it all was Tumba, her shadow, her rock, her best friend. Their days settled into a rhythm so natural it felt like destiny. Mornings, breakfast and mischief. Afternoons, naps and quiet companionship. Evenings, strolls in starlight. Weekends, adventures to the park, where children would gasp and whisper, "Is that a raccoon with a dog?" "Yes," they'd say, and they're best friends. People often asked, "Isn't it strange? A raccoon and a dog?" But those who knew them understood. It wasn't strange at all. It was love in its purest form, unconditional, unwavering, and utterly without boundaries. Crystal's mobility never improved. She would always need help to move, to eat, to explore. But with Tumba by her side, she never felt limited. She felt seen, cherished, free. And Tumba? He was happier than they'd ever seen him. His eyes held a softness they hadn't before. His presence was calmer, more centered, as if Crystal had awakened something in him. A deeper capacity for patience, for quiet devotion, for love that asks for nothing in return. Their story spread. Neighbors shared it. Strangers cried when they heard it. Children learned about kindness from watching the two of them sit together. One furry and small, the other large and gentle, connected by something words could never capture. Crystal's life wasn't what anyone had planned. But in its unexpected turns, it became a beacon of hope. A reminder that brokenness doesn't define you. That disability doesn't mean less. That love doesn't care about species, limitations, or the way the world says things should be. She may have lost the wild, but she gained something just as wild in its own way. A heart that chose her again and again, without hesitation. And Tumba, he didn't just gain a companion. He found his soul's match in the unlikeliest of creatures. Now, when they walk down the street, Crystal in her stroller, Tumba beside her, tail wagging, eyes alert. They don't look like an odd pair. They look like home. Because love always finds a way, even when the path is crooked, even when the body doesn't cooperate, even when two souls from different worlds collide in a backyard on an ordinary morning. Crystal's eyes still shine with curiosity. Tumba's heart still beats with loyalty. And together, they prove that the most beautiful relationships aren't the ones that make sense, but the ones that choose each other anyway. If their story touched you, let it remind you, you don't have to be normal to be loved. You don't have to be perfect to belong. And sometimes, your greatest gift isn't what you can do, but who you're loved by. Cherish your Tumbas. Be someone's Crystal. And never underestimate the power of showing up, quietly, patiently, wholeheartedly, for someone who needs you. Because in the end, that's what changes everything.